have a hard time passing up a good deal on succulents. The other day I was at Walmart and I decided to check out their plants and just see if they had anything decent. And that is when I found these for $4. And as you can see, they are overflowing with Haworthia babies. I've also been prepping for some upcoming local markets where I've been selling snappy pots, and I've been selling succulents in the snappy pots instead of selling just the pots on their own. And I like selling Haworthia in them because they are really good in low light. So when I saw these, I thought these would be perfect to replant and let them grow a little bit bigger and use them for a market I have coming up in a few months. I can definitely use these bigger ones right now. And these others, if I pull them off and fertilize and get them under some good light, I think I should be able to get them big enough to put into some bigger pots by the time that market comes around. I didn't just buy one of these, I bought 4 of them. So I am going to have a ton of these Haworthias, and I love this type. These just have a really cool look and feel to them. They are one that you can touch and it won't bother the plant, unlike an Echeveria, which has the farina that will wipe off if you touch it. Some of the bigger ones I'll plant right into the final planters that I'll end up selling at the markets, and the smaller ones I'm going to pot into a bigger pot all together and give them some space to grow, but that way I can just water them all at once and pull out the ones that grow the fastest and repot them later. Something that was interesting about these, when I watered them a little bit after I got them, I noticed there was a bunch of soil that was missing on the bottom here. I think that just happens over time. The soil just falls out the bottom of the pot, it gets washed out. So some of these roots were bare, but the roots look really healthy, and I didn't see any signs of overwatering, which is impressive for succulents from a big box store. So that's part of why I got 4 of these, because they looked like they were in really good shape. I did water these once after I got them, but I wanted them to be dry when I worked with them. Not super dry and deflated, but it's probably been about a week since I watered them. I did not put them into the succulent tracker app when I got them, which I now regret because I don't know when I watered them. But they are dry enough that I'm not gonna cause any problems as I work with the soil here. And they're plump enough still that they should transplant really nicely. Just trying to break up the roots and get off as much of the original soil as possible. When I pull the babies off, I want to get as much root attached to each baby as I can. That will help them transplant easier. It'll help them grow faster. Having said that, there's a good chance that most of these are going to come off without any roots. It's kind of tricky to tell. But the nice thing is with succulents, they grow roots, even if they don't have any in the first place. Haworthia roots are much thicker than most other succulent roots, but you can see, look how thick that is. These roots are really healthy. Normally, if I was just repotting this as is, I wouldn't go to all of this effort of getting this much of the original soil off. I do like to pull off a lot of the original soil, but a big part of why I'm pulling this off now is because I want to see what these roots are attached to, and I can't do that with the soil covering it all up. But I can see there's a lot of babies, and it looks like most of them are just kind of attached to the mother plant. So I have a feeling I'm really going to pull off stuff and it's not going to have a lot of roots. But we'll see what happens. I've got 4 to practice with. All right, here we go. Where to begin? Okay, this is like a super little one. Man, I don't know. This is going to be really, really tricky to get any roots here. Okay, it's not working how I had hoped. So my great debate here is, do I keep pulling these off? Yeah, they are just not coming with any roots. They're all just really attached right up into the base of the mother plant. These are just not, they're not attached to the roots. So if we zoom in close here, you can see these were really just attached to the base, and all of these roots are attached to the mother plant. So my current debate is, do I do this, pull off all these babies and have them root on their own? Or on these other ones, do I just stick them in soil and let them grow and see if they'll start to put off their own roots? They could grow faster with the mother plant still attached, and then put off their own roots. I'm really, really torn. I don't like planting Haworthia babies without roots. They can absolutely do it, but where they're breaking like this, I just don't feel like they are set up for success. All right, I'm going to keep going with this one. I'm going to pull all the babies off. If I'm going to pull it off, this is what I want it to look like. I want it to have more of that stem kind of attached instead of most of these. It's like I've just broken the plant off instead of getting a lot of the stem that was actually attached to the mother plant. This one, you can actually see it really well. You can see there's a longer stem here. That's what I want to get, is that stem. So I'm going to go in and cut that off rather than break it off. Well, that was a good call. This one has a little root. Woohoo! There's one success. All right, the very last one here I'm going to chop off. I've got this mother plant. Looks really, really good. I'm going to plant her up on her own. And let's see how many babies I got from this one. 12 baby succulents, plus the mother, lucky number 13, for $4. All right, these need to dry off. I can put them into dry soil. I am gonna wait a day and then plant them because I do want the end to callus over. Everyone has their own opinion on whether or not to do that. With these, I just don't want to risk anything, so I'm gonna wait and let them dry out and then plant them. Since that first batch had so many that came off without roots and they were really just attached to the parent plant, I'm inclined with these other 3 to just clean them off really good, pot them up in a bigger pot, let them grow a little bit more on their own, and then try and break them apart later. Once they have a little bit more space, these babies will be able to come out, reach the sunshine, they'll get a longer stem and hopefully get some more roots like we saw on one of the babies in that other group, and that will make them much easier to transplant. Now, keep in mind, this is just a 2.5-inch pot. This is not a large pot of succulents. So to get 13 out of that one container is pretty impressive. It's interesting too that even though these were all watered at the same time, this one has retained a lot more water than the one I previously pulled apart. This soil is damp, which I don't think it's problematic to be pulling it apart at this stage, but it is interesting to me. And that is one of the reasons why you can't just go on a watering schedule for your succulents. You have to really check the soil, pay attention to the type of plant, and water based on that. So following the soak and dry method, but not just assuming that each plant is going to be the exact same as its neighbor. As I'm looking at the bottom of this one, the roots are still very healthy, but I'm seeing that same pattern here where these are just really curved in still. They seem like they're more attached to the base of the mother plant rather than growing roots of their own. So I am going to move forward with my plan of potting these individually, giving them a little bit more space, fertilizing, waiting a few weeks, and seeing if I can repot then. It might take a couple months, but I have a few months to wait. So that's why you want to start stuff like this early. All right, round 3. Let's see what we've got. This group of succulents has a lot more, maybe not a lot more, it has bigger, thicker roots. So these really big, chunky roots. It doesn't have as many of these little feeder roots. And that tells me that it's been in a soil that's too compact. That's one of the things that the Bonsai Jack Gritty Mix is great for. It helps encourage all of those little feeder roots, which help keep the plant a lot more healthy. It's easier for the plant to withstand drought and absorb the nutrients that it needs. This one has a ton of just itty bitty ones coming in too. I'm really curious to see what happens with these when we give them more space. And you'll notice I'm pulling out the flowers that were starting to bloom on some of these. I don't want them to flower. I would like them to put all of their effort into making these little pups a lot bigger and getting more roots. I can see right here, I can see the stem and where it attaches to the mother plant. So I'm just gonna go in with this one and chop it and see what happens. It has roots. This is what I was hoping for. This is what I wanted all of them to come off like. So I'd have a little bit of stem and a little bit of root. That way I could pot it up and it would already have a jump start to growing. I don't see any others that I feel confident doing that on right now. I can maybe do it to this one, maybe to this one. Why not? Let's give it a try. Well, I got two there. And no roots. But we made room for these two little babies. All right, we're gonna leave that one be. Very lopsided. Okay, and our fourth and final pot. Let's see what we can do with this one. I don't see anything on this that I feel comfortable cutting off right now either. So we're just gonna pot it up and away we'll go. So if I did my math right, we have about 50 little Haworthia pups here. Well, some big and some little. I am gonna give these a day to rest, all of the little itty bitty ones. And then I am also gonna plant these up tomorrow also after those have dried and just do all the work at once. These will be totally fine sitting overnight, not in soil. Now that I've waited a day, I'm gonna go ahead and get all of these potted up. The larger ones I'm gonna put right into Bonsai Jack Gritty Mix. The cuttings I'm actually gonna put into a mixture of Bonsai Jack Gritty Mix. That will be 3/4 of it. And then the top, I'm actually gonna put Magic Succulent Soil from Andrea at Just Suck It. It's a really good gritty mix that retains a bit more water than Bonsai Jack's gritty mix. And so I feel like it will help these to root, but then they can go into the full gritty mix that I typically use after. I want to make sure that all of the roots are completely buried, but that the leaves are above the rim of the pot. I've found that if the leaves get below the rim of the pot, even if they're not under soil, a lot of times it can cause the leaves to start to rot and go mushy. One down and 3 to go. Now you might have noticed that these pots are actually not that much larger than the original pots these plants came in, and that is intentional. I want to give them more space, but Haworthia actually tend to put off more pups and they grow a little bit better if they are slightly root bound. I have heard that said a number of times, but I've actually talked with one of the growers at Mountain Crest Gardens, and she said when they want their Haworthia to pup, they make sure that they are root bound, and it makes a huge difference. So the combination of fertilizing these and having them still slightly root bound will help all of this to just keep growing, and then we'll hopefully get some roots on these babies and be able to pull them apart in a couple months. And then lastly, we have the one that has no more babies attached to it. And I did want to let it dry out just because I didn't want these wet areas to absorb water. I am working with totally dry soil, so it shouldn't have been an issue, but I always like to be on the safe side. Now for all these cuttings, I'm going to be planting them in these liners that we use for the Snappy Pot magnet planters. I love that the drainage is just really open on the bottom, but the soil stays in. And most of these will end up being sold in these fridge planters at some local markets. So I'm going to just start them in here and hope that they grow big enough in the next few months to be sellable. And if not, they'll at least be in really good drainage, really good soil, and I can always transplant them later if needed. As I said, I am going to put a little bit of this magic succulent soil on top. That way they'll have a slightly more organic soil that they'll be potted into and help them root, but then they'll grow into this much grittier mix so that they get all of those healthy feeder roots. I'm going to try and pair a slightly larger one with a slightly smaller one. And that way, hopefully as they grow, they'll just look like a nice little grouping. Now, these don't have roots on them, and typically, like I said, I like the leaves of the plants to be above the soil line or above the rim of the pot. Since they don't have roots, they can't be. So I am burying them a little bit, but I don't want them like stuck in super deep either, because that again can cause problems. So I'm just keeping them in this top little layer, and I will keep the top of this moist every couple days. That way it helps encourage new roots to grow, but I'm not gonna have it be soaking wet, because sitting in really soaking wet soil can be problematic for these cuttings. And then this one has a root. It's my one and only. Oops, and I broke some of it off. Cute. So I am going to put the root in there and cover it with this magic succulent soil. Also, it's just really fun to say magic succulent soil. It just feels good. And then I'll put the final cutting in next to it. And now we have a whole bunch of nicely repotted Haworthia pups and the mother plants, and all for a really good deal. I am especially excited to see how these grow without any roots on them. As I have mentioned before, I'm sure that they will grow roots. Some of them may survive and some of them might not, which is the case with almost everything that you do. But if things go well and they root pretty quickly, I may end up unpotting these and pulling the babies off sooner than I thought, even if they don't have roots, because I would like to get these going and planted on their own. Now, someone's probably going to ask, is it okay that I'm repotting these so soon after each other? Like if I waited 2 months and found that these were all rooting super well, then I come back and unpot these, pull off all the babies and repot it. Isn't that problematic or super stressful for the succulents? I have not found that to be a problem as long as the plants are healthy when I'm repotting them and I'm on a good watering routine where they're getting water at the right interval, where it's not too much and not too little. Where I feel like you really end up with problems if you have succulents in extreme weather, in hot or cold. But where I'm potting all of these and growing them all indoors, I have found that generally the plants are very happy to be repotted and they don't seem to mind as long as they're getting the other care that they need. Plenty of light and enough water. I'll keep you posted on how these grow. I'm really hoping to have some much larger pups in the next 2 to 3 months that will be sellable at upcoming markets.